feel the need to be loud. I feel the need to be loud. I feel the need to be loud, and I don't have the ability to be loud. I live in the most winterless place in North America, Phoenix, Arizona. Even warmer than Tucson, believe it or don't. And yet I am a prisoner of winter every year. Kathleen is a prisoner of winter right now. Ebony has left all winters behind, and I'm left with the third of my three princesses. Cherry Bomb, my Stratocaster clone. But I have her to make noise for me, so I have a reason to be of good cheer. It's Super Bowl Sunday. My presumption is that everyone in the world is going to watch the Super Bowl, and nobody is going to watch the Church of Splendor. Not to say that anybody actually watches the Church of Splendor anyway, but my vast audience of dozens will certainly be cut in half today. And accordingly, I'm going to be very, very brief, one may hope. In October of 2014, I was a speaker at the 21 convention in Tampa. It's the second time I spoke at the 21 convention. And was fired immediately afterwards, so I presumably will never speak at another 21 convention event. I have no idea why I was fired, and I'm pretty sure that no one else has any idea either, but it doesn't really make any difference. The way I have of measuring success when I work with other people is that I will hit the ball out of the park. I will blow everyone away. And what I expect in consequence for doing a truly remarkable job is either that I will be promoted or fired. And accordingly, I was fired, and this is supposed to matter something to someone, but I am not that someone. In the presentation I made, I illuminated why it wouldn't make any difference to me not being fired. I wasn't anticipating that, but why anybody's bad opinion of me, I suppose. People are always trying to manipulate me with games that would only work on incandescents of sociable people. Everyone assumes that everyone else is just like him. I make this assumption too. Everyone makes this mistake. This is what we've been talking about the past 3 weeks in talking about rancor management, is the nature of dispossibility, is to assume that everyone else shares your values, and if they're not coming through for you, it must be born of malice. Malice must be the reason. This is not the truth. But you have to remind yourself of that. I have to remind myself of that all the time, because whenever people are not producing for me in sufficient quantity, I always assume that they're out to get me. But I actually have no concern whatever for other people's opinions. Not bad opinions, but also not good opinions. Opinions are... If you can't defend your opinion in the form of a rational argument that I can parse in my own time and translate into my own language in order to understand it in a way that makes sense to me, if you don't make sense to me, I don't really care what you say. So your praise, I will be gracious about it because this is appropriate when people are praising you, but doesn't mean anything to me. If there's no underlying meaning, it doesn't mean anything. It's just an envelope. And in the same respect, rancorous criticism means nothing whatever to me. I recognize it for what it is, that it's the shoe pinching on the other guy's foot. I don't intend to walk a mile in his shoes, and so I don't give a rat's ass if his shoe pinches. But the presentation that I made in Tampa was exemplary, in my opinion. And my opinion matters to me a great, great deal. I think I did a really good job. I thought so at the time, but of course I couldn't see it. I was doing it. And when I'm doing things, I'm doing nothing else. I'm doing exactly what I'm doing and not one other thing. I'm not engaged in any sort of editing or self-censorship or second-guessing or doubts. I'm not doing any of the things that people do. Marco Rubio, for instance, last night in the Republican debate, but Ted Cruz also, and Donald Trump, every one of those candidates was doing his best not to make a mistake. And when you're doing your best not to make a mistake, I got bad news. You're making a mistake because you're not doing what you're doing. Agi quod agis. Do what you're doing. And literally what it means is do what you're doing right now. Whatever it is you're doing right now, do that and do nothing else. Agi quod agis. And I lived by that. Before I knew the Latin for that, I lived by that. And so I felt at the time that I had made a killer presentation. I got a standing ovation, which is a good indication that I did well. I was one of 2 standing ovations at the event, and my impression was that I was, at a minimum, second best. I was the second best presentation at the event, and I heard back from attendees that they had that impression. I was told that there was a post hoc marketing survey done, and that the results reported by the attendees were to that conclusion also, that mine was the second best presentation. But I didn't know because I hadn't seen it, and until Friday I hadn't seen it. I've been begging for this since I got fired. I've been begging for this video to be released, and it's released in the most niggardly and kind of offensive possible way. But again, I don't take offense at this sort of crap. I really don't care. I just wanted to see the video. And I really don't care if anybody else sees it, except for my wife. I want Kathleen to see it. She hasn't seen it yet because she's been ill. But I wanted to see it in order to see if my impression was correct, if I had actually done the job I thought I had done. And I'm very happy with it. And this is one of those things you're never supposed to say. You're never supposed to say, oh God, I did a good job. I did a really great job. It's okay to have that feeling about your work, but you're never supposed to say, I don't give a shit about that either. I really don't care. But I commend you to this video. I will link to it in the YouTube remarks section. And when I post this video on self-adoration, I'll provide the link there. At the same time that I gained access to that video, I also gained access to an interview that I had done with Marilee Johnson immediately after the speech. And so I was addlepated. I mean, I don't do anything else. Agi quod agis. When I'm doing something, I don't do anything else. And so I had spoken for on the order of 65 minutes. And I was drained. I mean, it was gone. I left it all on the stage, and so I'm doing this interview afterward, and I'm pretty addlepated. But it was a good interview anyway. I really enjoyed it. I had a fun time talking with Marilee, both on and off the camera. And then the following day, I did a podcast with Steve Mayetta and Socrates and me. I think I've linked to this in the past at Self-Adoration, but I'll provide a link to that also. That by then I'd been up all night with Socrates and I'd had almost no sleep, and I was really addlepated. But this being without sleep brings out the creativity in me. So I think I was funny. I don't know that I was all that intellectually valuable, but I was funny. The speech that I gave at the presentation that I gave at the 21 convention in Tampa was about empathy strategies and DISC, exactly the stuff that we've been talking about the past 3 weeks, and that I've been talking about since the late summer of 2014. Since I wrote 9 Empathies, I've been talking about the underlying empathy strategies that result in the DISC personality profile, how you can use my understanding of empathy strategies to more deeply inform the DISC idea in order to end up with very reliable, very predictable praxis of human behavior. I stood up in a room full of INTJ high Cs, very cautious individuals, the nerd prototype, the software engineer sort of profile. Not all of these guys are software engineers, but they're very much like software engineers in their approach to everything. They're good students, good at math, good at science, good at seeking external validation for every idea that they might consider, whether they're seeking to embrace it or reject it. And these are the guys who are most socially inept, least capable of navigating the social environment, and I stood in front of them, and for 65 minutes I gave them a scorecard to human motivation. I gave them a way of understanding what it is that other people are doing and how to respond appropriately, up to and including the disc of poker, which I had promised to do in a video that I made the previous day for the Church of Splendor. And so I'll link to that also. The Disc of Love and Sales was that particular episode of the Church of Splendor, but I'll link to that also. But I stood in front of a room full of INTJ high Cs and told them what it is that's going on in their lives, why all of these other people around them are so mystifying, and how to understand what it is that they want, how they'll go about getting it, and how to respond in such a way that these gentlemen could achieve their own social goals in a way that makes sense to them, in a way that makes sense to the cautious temperament. I have a vast spreadsheet that I've been working on for 15, 16 months of inferences that I can draw from understanding the underlying empathy strategies that result in the DISC personality profile. And it's endlessly, boundlessly amusing to me that I have a spreadsheet of emotions. The one thing that you can't do with the spreadsheet is account for emotions, and that's what I've got, is a spreadsheet that accounts for emotions. I share it privately with people. It's actually a publicly available spreadsheet, but I share it privately with people from time to time. If you'd like for me to share it with you, hit me up privately one way or another, either by email or a private message on Facebook or whatever, and I will happily share it with you. It grows from time to time as my understanding grows. But pieces of that spreadsheet were used to make the slides for the presentation that I gave. And I've made those slides available on Self-Adoration also, so perhaps I'll link to those also with this video. But it was fun for me to watch the video to see how inappropriate I am for the 21 convention idea of everything. I did an interview in August of 2013 with Anthony Johnson, Socrates, and Marilee Johnson. And I'll link to that also, but that is a painful experience as far as I'm concerned, because it's about 3 hours long, and in my opinion is highly repetitive. And the reason that it's highly repetitive is that I don't fit any cautious temperament's idea of structure. I don't fit into a structured environment. I am the ultimate in chaos from a cautious temperament's point of view. I don't plan for things. I don't idealize planning. I don't. So in a case like this, in making this presentation, I did these 12 slides that I used for this presentation. I did them the week before I went to Tampa, and that was the extent of my planning for the presentation that I made, was those 12 slides. And those 12 slides I could have used to defend a half a dozen different arguments. I didn't know for sure what argument I was going to make until I started making it. Whereas most of the presentations that were made at the 21 convention are completely canned. They're essentially memorized. People are standing up on stage and speaking for 40, 50, 55 minutes with a completely memorized presentation. It's like Marco Rubio last night. It is so, unfortunately, very easy to throw them off the script because they don't have any true underlying understanding of what it is they're talking about. It's impossible to throw me off message because I know exactly what I intend to talk about. And so this interview that I did in Orlando, in Socrates' house, beautiful home, is painful because Anthony wanted to organize it in question and answer format rather than just having a conversation with me. The ideal way for me to do that sort of thing would be to just have a conversation. It might have lasted 90 minutes instead of 180 minutes. But just let me have the conversation, and if you want to cut it up into smaller chunks later, you can do that. You can figure out how to cut it up. But trying to ask me a question, you ask me a question, and the answer is going to be 90 minutes long because I'm going to take care of everything along the way. If you see me do podcasts with other people, you'll see that unfortunate side effect again and again and again. They have a long list of questions they want to ask me, and really all you have to do is wind me up and turn me loose, and I'll cover everything you want to talk about and then some. But in a question and answer format, there's going to be a lot of repetition because I'm going to cover the same ground over and over again. It's all one thing as far as I'm concerned. The entire universe, universo, one turning, the universe is all one thing, and I approach it that way. And so you ask me any question at all, we're going to cover the entire universe. You only have to ask me one question. How are you is sufficient. Marilee Johnson told me when we were getting ready to do this interview that she was grateful to talk to me, or maybe she told me afterward that she was grateful to talk to me because I actually engaged in conversation rather than giving scripted responses to expected questions. But in making this presentation, it was obvious, I saw it when I watched it Friday night, it was obvious to me how inappropriate I am for the 21 convention idea because I engage in Socratic debate. I must interact with the audience. So I will throw out, I started with a physical exercise. I threw out questions all the way through. This is completely inappropriate for what Anthony Johnson wants to do because he wants to produce videos. He's not really putting on a convention, as it were, a conference. He's producing videos of live performances. And so my live performance was inappropriate for his needs because I'm engaging in the audience. They're not hooked up to the microphone, so you can't hear what they're saying. I repeated as necessary things that they said, but I'm sure I was a huge disappointment to him in that way, and who knows what other way, whatever it was that got me fired. I am consistently disappointing to people who want to organize the universe in spreadsheets. So, dang. How sad is that? But the presentation I made is excellent. It wasn't appropriate for Anthony's purposes. Too bad, so sad for him, but very appropriate for my purposes. I did what I came to do, which was to tell these young men what they're getting wrong and how to get it right going forward. And it's beneficial that way for you as well. And so I commend you to this video in particular. When I do post these links, I'm going to post them in the order that I want you to pursue them, so that when I ultimately overwhelm you, which I will do, when you've had enough of me, you will have seen the best of it in the appropriate order anyway. So we'll organize it in a hierarchy, and if you end up making it to the 3-hour interview in Orlando, you will have good evidence that you are of a cautious temperament and you're afraid not to do all the homework. But the presentation itself is a 65-minute introduction to empathy strategies my way, how to understand what's going on in the world around you, how to understand the people that you interact with and what it is about them that makes them so mystifying, and how to penetrate that mystery in such a way that you can get what you want from them, they can get what they want from you, and that you're both happy with each other going forward. And if you're not happy, then I would hope you can be happily fired instead. I certainly am. My name is Greg Swan. This is the Church of Splendor. I'm so glad that you attend to be, especially today on Super Bowl Sunday or whenever you're seeing this film. And I'll talk to you again next week.